Alright, can y'all hear me okay back there? We good? Alright, cool. Well, hi y'all. Nobody's had the chance to formally welcome you. Welcome to Magnolia Plantation. My name is Michael. I'm going to be your guide for the nature train today. We're going to be taking about a 40 to 45 minute tour around the property. We're going to be going across pretty much all 500 acres of it. And of course, this is the nature train, so we'll see what wildlife we see along the way, talk about the flora fauna. This is my first time out this morning, so I have no idea what's out this morning. We'll see it together. Other than that, I'll give you a little bit about the history of Charleston and Magnolia. If you've already heard about Charleston history since you've been here, sorry, there may be a little bit of repeat information, but hey, I gotta give it to those who haven't heard it yet. Other than that, we'll just stop and talk about anything that seems cool. Sound good?
Yes.
Alright, let's go. Now, if absolutely none of that sounds interesting to you, you've got about a 40 to 45 minute nap in store. But for those of y'all still with me, I want you to look out to your left. Right in front of me, about by 11 o'clock, this big old tree right here in the open field. This is a live oak tree. Virginia live oak, to be specific. And it's the oldest one here on the property. Over 400 years old. If you come up to where I'm at right now and you look back at the tree, you may notice what looks like where used to be a giant hole dug in the side of the tree, kind of like a scar. That'd be because at one point or another, that tree was hollowed out and used for firewood. See, for 400 years old, it should be a decent bit bigger, but since it was hollowed out, stunted its growth. Still alive though, 400 years and still growing strong. You're on the left here, that tan roof building, that'd be the old carriage house. Built in 1840, place to store the horses and whatnot. Renovated in the 1990s to be used as a reception or wedding venue. See about 5 weddings go through there each week. On the other side of that building would have been the Ashley River. One of the 2 major rivers that makes up the downtown Charleston Peninsula. The other one on the east side being the Cooper River. If you get the chance to walk along the path on the Ashley River today here at Magnolia, I would suggest it. The Ashley River is a brackish river, meaning it's part saltwater, part freshwater. So even though we're 10 miles inland, we still see dolphins make their way out here. It can be quite the sight to see. Now around here, I'd like to get into a little bit of history. So it's our way back when. Charleston itself is named for King Charles II of England. Now he had 8 royal buddies, otherwise known as the 8 Lords Proprietors. These 8 lords were loyalists, people who helped him keep the throne. And when he claimed all of the Carolinas to be his, he gifted that land to the 8 Lords Proprietors. Our local one around here would be a Sir Anthony Ashley Cooper, hence the name of the 2 rivers. Now, those Lords Proprietors would come and settle this land exactly in 1670. The land that we're currently on, of Magnolia, was bought and settled in 1676 by a Sir Stephen Fox. I'll get back to him in a minute. Now, if you didn't know already, Magnolia was an operational rice plantation all the way up until the end of the Civil War. Now, if that was the first time you heard that Magnolia was a rice plantation, and you nodded your head and you said, that's exactly what I thought I'd hear, I think you're lying to me. Definitely not what somebody goes to. When they hear plantation, you probably go for something more textbook, for something here in America like cotton, indigo, or tobacco, or so on. But trust me when I say they tried to grow all that stuff out here, just unsuccessfully so. What did grow out here, and incredibly well, was rice. Rice was king. They grew a particular kind of rice called Carolina gold rice. Not so much named for its color, more so for its value, worth its weight in gold. Stuff was a very profitable crop for these plantation owners. Stuff was nicknamed the rice of kings. There's even records of Napoleon buying the stuff. Very profitable. So of the 400 acres originally bought by Stephen Fox, they would gradually expand to 2,000 acres. Now, Stephen Fox would have a daughter named Anne Fox. She would marry a man named Thomas Drayton. He was an English settler from Barbados. This land would be gifted to the Drayton possession by the Stephen Fox as a wedding gift, which was quite the wedding gift. 2,000 acres worth of land. And it is actually still owned by the Drayton family to this day. 12 generations, over 300 years of continual ownership, uninterrupted. 13th generation growing up right now. Now, of the 2,000 acres that Magnolia used to be, we only sit on about 500 now. The reason that would be because of the Reverend John Drayton. He was the owner of the plantation before, during, and after the Civil War. He would make the fatal mistake of investing in Confederate stocks and bonds. Meaning that after the Civil War, he's got a bunch of money invested into a country that doesn't exist anymore, putting them in quite a bit of debt. To get out of that debt, he sold the house downtown and about 1,500 acres of this here land to a phosphate mining company. To save the 500 acres we now sit on right now, which contained his precious gardens and also the big house, which he wanted a chance to rebuild because it was burnt down during the Civil War by the Union Army. He opened the gardens and this land to the public as a tourist attraction in 1870, which is why Magnolia is still here today. Alright, coming up here on the left, this is Ravenswood Pond. This is a former rice field. Most of the ponds that we'll be crossing were former rice fields. Take a look to your right, take a look to your left. All rice fields. For miles and miles and miles. Right now, what we're going on right now would have been the firm dike or levee that would basically act as a path between, but also separate these fields from one another. Something to walk on that was dry. Now, I want to point out all this green stuff that covers the surface of the water here. Most people think this to be algae or pond scum. What this rather is the world's smallest flowering plant, known as duckweed. Each of these plants is about the size of a pinhead, absolutely tiny. And the wind blows them together to form these massive colonies of them. So when you look out here on this duckweed, you're actually looking at about millions upon millions of individual duckweed plants. And by the way, simply put, they're called duckweed because the ducks love to eat them. Very nutritious for the waterfowl, has more protein than soy. I want to mention real quick here on the left, this island. This island would have not been here. This forested island would have not been here when this was a rice field. This is man-made by us. This is called a rookery. This is a place for the birds to put their nest in, raise their young. But it's time to stop talking about that. It's time to start talking about the star of our show. Some of you have probably already seen it. On that wooden platform to the right of the rookery, we got the American alligator. It's a decent sized one too. If y'all are perceptive enough, you may be able to see at the base of its tail, you got a yellow-bellied sliding turtle also hanging out with them on that ramp. I'm going to try to get y'all a good look so I can stop and talk about them for a second. Alright, how's that? Everybody got a good look? Should I pull up? Especially if you're all in the back, we're good? Cool. Good old American alligator. You are too far north for the crocodile. If you want to go see a wild crocodile, you got to go to the southern tip of Florida. Tropical climates only. That guy right there, judging by the size of him, he's about maybe 4 or 5 feet. Probably 5 feet would be a more accurate guess. And I can tell by that length that he's about 5 years old. Alligators will actually grow proportional to their age until the age of 5, meaning they grow a foot per year. So if you see a 1 to 2 foot long alligator, good chance they're 1 to 2 years old. They grow like that proportionally till 5. Now they continue to grow until they die. They grow up to 30 to 50 years in the wild. But they do not grow to foot per year, luckily for you and me, because if they did, I would not live here and I would not be your tour guide. lucky, not everybody gets to see a gator out of the water. Most people just will see the eyes and the nose. In fact, if you actually look probably about a diagonal to him, there's another gator, tiny gator, poking his eyes out of the water in the duckweed. You might be able to see him. I'll do my best to try and point him out to you, but you may be able to see those bumps in the water. Now, when most people get to see an alligator, they're only going to see their eyes and their nose in the water. They're ambush predators. They don't like to be seen, especially when they're hunting. Right? When they're doing this, they're sunbathing. They're digesting food. They're cold-blooded reptiles. They need to use the sun to warm up. Unlike you and me, we're burning energy 24/7 to keep ourselves warm. They need to use the sun to do that. By the way, these white birds you'll see them flying about, these are snowy egrets. Got a bunch of different egret species around here. When they're in the water like that, maybe we'll see a better example of another one coming up here. I'll try to look out for one. It's hard to get a good grasp on the size of that gator without having a friend and a tape measure and you're willing to get wet. The safe way that we like to take the measurement of an alligator when you can only see part of it is called eyes to nose, inches to feet. This isn't an exact science, but it's typically fairly accurate. Basically, I just want y'all to imagine you take that flat part of the snout behind the nose to the front of the eyes. Think about how big that is in inches, do your best guess. Convert that to feet, and that's typically how big the alligator is. It's very hard to tell how big a gator is when you only see its eyes and its nose, because the tail will always make up more than half its length. And they use that tail to propel themselves up to speeds of 20 miles per hour. So unless your name is Michael Phelps, I wouldn't just try to outswim one. Now right here, y'all gave it a good time. Take a look at this solo tree on the left-hand side here. Home to the two biggest species of birds here on the property. The two white ones, those are great egrets. The one at the top, that's a great blue heron. Specifically, that one's a juvenile. I know that because his color hasn't come in yet. I want y'all to take a good look at that egret nest though. Y'all came at a good time. You see those white puffballs right underneath? Hatched 5 days ago. Y'all came at a pretty decent time. And my favorite thing to do while I'm here, that great blue heron will be here for a while. It's one of the type of birds, unlike a duck, who will leave its nest within the first 24 hours. They will stay until they're basically fully grown. However, that one is not fully grown. So it'll be here for a while. And it has been here for a while. Now, the great blue heron can grow up to 4 feet tall. That one right there is about 3 feet tall. Standing up. The one at the top, by the way. Do me a favor, think in your head how old you think it is. Most people get it wrong. Everybody got a guess in their head? I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the engine, so I can't have any shouted answers, but everybody got an answer? It's gonna be 2 months old. Raise your hand if you got it right. We're by an honor system. Alright, everybody's honest. See, I told you. I've only seen a few people guess right. Yeah. 2 months old, they grow really quickly. Really fast. Actually, real quick here, on the right side, at about my 1 o'clock, there's a great blue heron hunting right now, out in the swamp right there. Depending on who you ask, these birds are either the smartest or the laziest hunters around. They're ambush predators, similar to an alligator, in which they'll wait for prey to come to them and make the wrong move rather than go after it. They'll wait on perches or slowly trudge through swamps, stalking their prey. Notice it barely moves since we noticed it. By the way, if luckily for y'all, I want to talk a little bit about the alligators again. These gators, this is their home. They are completely wild. We do not tag them, track them, or keep them in any way. They're free to come and go as they please. That also means they're free to come up on the path. They're home. They don't do it too often, but they will every now and then. I've seen a few in my time here. We built these wooden platforms not just for them to get to be able to sun themselves, but to try and coerce them into doing it out there rather than over here. But once again, they are free to do as they please. Luckily for y'all, however, alligators are more docile when compared to their meaner, angrier cousins, the crocodiles, who hate me and hate you. They hate everything. They will not be nice. However, American alligator, especially these guys, consider us more predator than prey. However, once again, not harmless. The bigger ones can be territorial. So don't go screwing with one, because they'll screw with you. Likely, there have been no recorded incidents of anybody being hurt by an alligator since this place has been a tourist attraction. So don't become the first instance, got it? Now, the American alligator actually has one of the best bites in the animal kingdom, one of the fiercest. And it's hard to get a good grasp on how fierce that bite is without comparing it to something y'all may be familiar with. So, we'll start there. We measure bite force in pounds per square inch, otherwise PSI. A human's PSI is about 150, while a mastiff will be about 500. But the fully grown American alligator will have a PSI of about 3,000. And they exert all that force on the tips of their 80 teeth. They have a fierce bite. However, there's a decent trade-off to that. You ever notice an alligator hunter, Steve Irwin, whoever, go after an alligator, they're taking a wrestle with it, they're trying to calm it down, do whatever, right? Think about that. First thing that they go for is the jaw. Why do they go for the jaw? Because the fiercest bite in the animal kingdom. Reason being, the trade-off for having such strong muscles that close the jaw. Trade-off being that the muscles that open the jaw are incredibly weak. They can be held closed by duct tape. That's how weak they are. So I guess my advice to you, if you ever find yourself in a tussle with an alligator, go for that jaw and keep that thing closed. Alright, as we get to the next leg of our tour. Right here on the left, these white buildings. These would be the former enslaved cabins built in 1850 by the enslaved, for the enslaved. If you want a better look inside the cabins, but also a history of the enslaved people who lived here, you're going to want to take the Slavery to Freedom tour, / cabin tour. They meet right here. Luckily, they're just finishing up their tour, it looks like, so I can talk a little bit about it as we pass. You may notice each of these cabins is built as a duplex. They got 2 doors with a wall splitting them down the middle. That would mean that 2 enslaved families would live in each cabin at one time. Depending on the size of that family, we're talking about 10 to 15 people per cabin at one point. Now, even though no enslaved person lived in any of these cabins past the 13th Amendment, the last person to move out of that cabin right there moved out in 1990. They're occupied all the way until then. Last person to move out of that one right there was a gardener who worked here on the property. When he moved out of that cabin right there, they were actually going to tear all this stuff down. Demolition due to neglect. But a younger member of the Drayton family stepped in and said that this would be a great opportunity to take advantage of these. Use them. Learn from them. Not just look inside these cabins, but use them as a catalyst to tell the story of the enslaved people who lived here. If you have the time, the one, the need, I would highly suggest you take that Slavery to Freedom tour. It's one of my favorites here. Other than mine, of course. Now, fun fact. Not so fun, actually, but hey. The Slavery to Freedom tour is the least taken tour here. Sorry for the loudest bird on the property. Apologies. They got a military base in North Charleston. They fly over here all the time. Also the airport. Yeah, slavery to freedom. Lease taking tour on the property. Definitely not due to its lack of quality. Or definitely not due to quality, because it has plenty. Should have phrased that better. We're about to do a sort of social experiment. They're still debating on it. I hope they do it. I'd be interested to see the results. What they're going to do is they're going to increase general admission by a few dollars, but include the slavery to freedom tour within that cost. So given to you for free, quote unquote. We're going to see how many more people will take advantage of that opportunity when given to them for free. Will it go up? Will it go down? Or will it stay the same? I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic. We'll see. If you have the time, want, need, I would suggest take that tour. I'm not here to force y'all to do anything. You can do with your time as you please. But again, I would suggest it. Right here on the left at the very end. This building right here was not a slave cabin. This was just a smokehouse built in 1900, place to hang and store meat before refrigeration. And right here on my left, this is the second oldest live oak tree on the property. Just while we're passing by real close here. It's about 350 years old. And as you may have noticed, these trees tend to grow more wide than tall, and that's definitely on purpose. They grow more wide for their leaves to cover more surface area, catch more sun. If you had a boat made out of live oak wood in the 1600s or so, you were absolutely set, my friend. That thing was as hard as nails and worth a lot of money. By the way, of those 4 cabins we just passed, there were originally 11. They were not the original cabins here. The original cabins before then that these replaced were built in this field right here on the right-hand side. By the way, you can look at these other live oak trees that are here, all 200 years old. Alright, as we come down this way, I'm going to talk about an icon of the South. If you're from around here, you're familiar with it. If not, I want to introduce you to all this gray, scraggly stuff that hangs from these trees. It's called Spanish moss, which is a funny name for it because it's not Spanish, nor is it a moss. It's actually native here, and it's an epiphyte, meaning that it's an air plant. It gets its nutrients from the air and the wind around it. So also, unlike a moss, that means it doesn't need a host to grow. See, this stuff isn't growing from the trees. It's hanging on it like tinsel. More just something I think is how it got that name, Spanish moss. Especially because it's completely wrong. You wonder where the name came from. The Native Americans had a word for this stuff. They called it tree hair, which I think is a perfect name for it because that's exactly what it looks like. However, when the Spanish settlers came, the Native Americans started to see something they hadn't quite seen before. And that would be the Spanish settlers' long, scraggly beards. So the Native Americans called this stuff Spanish beards for a period of time, making fun of those Spanish settlers. And eventually, over time, in mistranslation, translated into English as Spanish moss. Now, that Spanish didn't like that so much. They didn't like being made fun of. They tried to turn it around to call it French beard or French hair, but it was too little too late. Name it stuck. By the way, real quick, as we pass by this on the left-hand side, I pointed out to y'all earlier that duckweed is a flowering plant. Simply means that it blooms. That's going to be all this red stuff right here. This is what duckweed looks like when it blooms. It turns its reddish color. And over here on the left, this is the Audubon Swamp Garden. This will be a self-guided tour if you're interested. What you do is go over to the ticket booth. You'll get a 4-digit code, and you'll enter it into that gate right there. You can see all the wildlife that calls it home now, including an otter. Otters are home to one of my favorite animal facts. They've got flaps of skin underneath their arms to act as pockets. They've got armpit pockets. And they'll use those armpit pockets to store their favorite rocks. They have a favorite rock. Put their favorite rock in their armpit pocket to use for later to crack open shells and whatnot to eat. I think those critters are amazing. Over here on the left, this will be where you're going to want to park. You'll see that big old gator sign. I would suggest this be the last thing that you do on your way out today, because this is the exit road out of here, just for y'all's convenience. Now, the Audubon Swamp Gardens actually has a couple Hollywood claims to fame. I'm curious to see it. Y'all probably seen the second one, but I need to ask. First one. Have any of y'all seen the movie The Swamp Thing? Couple people? Okay. Y'all are never going to get that time back, are you? If you haven't seen it, I can't fully suggest it. But hey, it was filmed here, so I talk about it. Other than that, being that in the early 2000s, some DreamWorks artists came by, took some inspiration from this here swamp. This is the swamp that Shrek would have been from. Hey, downtown's got The Notebook, we got Shrek and the Swamp Thing, so I'll take it, I guess. As we come down the road y'all came in on, I want you to take a look to your right. Down this road right here, we pass by these trees. They split the road in two. It'll be these palm tree looking things down this way on the right hand side. Long name for those is sable palmetto. We just call them the palmetto tree. And they are our state tree. We love them trees here. They are on everything. They are on the state flag. They are on the license plates, the driver's licenses, t-shirts, you name it. We've got that thing everywhere. Now, we don't just like that tree because it's cool looking, but because it has quite the story behind it. See, in 1776, during the Revolutionary War, the Charlestonians knew that Charleston Harbor was going to be a prime destination for a British attack. So, in a last-ditch effort to save their city, they fortified Charleston Harbor, and they lined a fort's walls out there that y'all can still see today, called Fort Moultrie, used all the way up until World War II, actually. Fort Moultrie. They lined that fort's walls with palmetto tree logs. If y'all aren't familiar, palmetto tree wood is soft and spongy. I definitely can't recommend getting into a fist fight with one though, because you'll lose. But hey, compared to a live oak or something like that, soft. So, when the British Navy showed up, they're shooting cannonballs at this fort. The fort's shooting cannonballs at them. They gotta take it down. But what's happening is one of two things. See, the British's cannonballs, they're either finding themselves lodged within the side of that palmetto tree wood, not splintering it. Think about throwing a baseball into a mud wall. Or two, they're bouncing right off. And this whole time, the British are shooting these cannonballs for hours upon hours upon hours, unsuccessfully damaging this fort. The Charlestonians are picking up those cannonballs, picking them out of the side of the walls, putting them back in their cannons, and shooting them back at the British. Eventually, the British took too much damage. They had to retreat, calling for a day. Marking not just one of the first major victories for South Carolina during the Revolutionary War, but for the entire 13th colony. Hence why it is our state tree. Now, of course, that wouldn't be the end of the war. The British would be back, and they'd be back with a vengeance. They'd come back in 1780. They would actually take over Magnolia for a period of time. And they would use Magnolia Plantation as a sort of forward operations base for their eventual takeover of downtown Charleston, in which they would be successful. They would take hold of Magnolia and downtown Charleston for a period of about 2 years before the end of the war. If you want to learn more about British occupation here, in more depth than I can afford to get into right now, you're going to want to go behind the house. And there's some signs along the Riverwalk that'll tell you about what happened here during the Revolutionary War. So basically, to summarize it, at one point or another, there were 3,000 British soldiers stationed here at one time. A lot of history to see here. Magnolia spent through 2 major American wars, over 300 years of history. Lots to learn from here. we get any further, I want to point out this down tree here on the left-hand side. I think this is pretty interesting for one quick reason. Well, first I'll tell you what it is. It's a water hickory tree. It produces a type of nut that is absolutely disgusting. This was knocked down about 2 years ago during Hurricane Dorian, but I'm not just pointing it out to you for you to cry tears over it. I want you to notice that its leaves are still green. The tree is actually still alive. If you come up to where I'm at, you'll be able to see that most of its leaves or roots are still in the ground. The tree's just been growing sideways for 2 years. So yeah, holding on strong despite being knocked over by a hurricane. Coming up here, this is where we found a lot of Native American artifacts around here, all dating back to the Mississippian era, which would have been about 1000 AD to 1400 AD. We found most of them right here on the left. This raised plot of land is actually marked on your map that you have of the entire area. It's known as the Native American Ceremonial Map, which is exactly what it was named. This is where we most likely think that the Native Americans would have gathered for spiritual or wedding ceremonies or so on. I'm sorry to dash your hopes if you're hoping for stories about a burial mound. We didn't find any bones here, so nothing to suggest it was one of those. Other less prominent theories meaning that this is just where the chieftain would have lived. He would have lived on this raised plot of land, king of the hill style. Took it down on his people and his territory. But we found most of those artifacts on this hill, dating this hill also to that Mississippian era. All simply to say that this hill, those people, were here long before the Draytons ever owned this land. Now that hill and those artifacts are too old for us to be able to tell what tribe exactly lived there or built them. But there are a lot of tribes that call themselves home to this area. For instance, you have the Kiowa, the Edison, the Yamasee, just to name a few. And you'll see a lot of these American tribe names in the area represented in the local street names, river names, island names. For instance, the Ashley River used to be called the Kiowa River. And there's Kiowa and Edisto Islands. And if you couldn't tell already, the Kiowa were particularly important to those early English settlers. They would actually be very helpful. They would teach these settlers how to survive in this new place they called home. They would teach them what to grow and what to hunt. Basically just not how to die. Very integral to their survival. However, not everybody is so friendly. The Yamasee tribe were hostile, and they would fight a war with the settlers called the Yamasee War. Not even to mention the French and the Spanish also fighting for territory around here. And on top of all those dangers, you've got a name that y'all are probably familiar with causing trouble around here. You got good old Blackbeard. He would actually blockade Charleston Harbor for a period of time, and he would ransom the city. In which he would be successful. He would get his ransom and sail off into the distance. A lot of threats to contend with those early settlers. Now, as we come around this corner, you're going to see another former rice field. This is formerly known as High Dyke Pond now. We like to call it Bubba's Pond, simply for who inhabits it. Every southern family has to have a Bubba, and our Bubba is a 13-foot male alligator who lives here. Now, I'm sorry, I gotta dash your hopes immediately. I can't promise you'll see Bubba. Bubba spends a lot of his time in the back of this pond, back that way, to the right. Looking for bigger game to eat. And that's not even to mention we're coming up on alligator mating season right now. So he's probably spending a lot of time back there with the 10-foot female alligator that also lives in here, named Bubette. If you look over to the left side of that pond, you'll be able to see some more nests in those trees. One in the middle, one in the very far back left. Those are also other great blue herons. And it actually seems that in the V of the one at the back, there's a new bird that made their nest there. That actually wasn't there on the day. From here, hard to tell from here. That definitely just looks like an egret. Yeah, it seems like a great egret making its nest. That wasn't there the other day. Interesting. Just to give y'all a glimpse of how big Bubba was, that wooden platform right there was built specifically for him 2 years ago because he broke the last one. Oh, this is cool. Okay. So we're going to come up on this little pond right here. And to the left of that, the very edge where those wooden blocks are, at the very edge of that pond, you'll see 3 little baby alligators resting on top of it. I'm going to go slow so y'all can see it. Those things are very cute. For now. Those of y'all who get up here and you look here right where I'm at right now, in this here ditch here, you'll see another yellow-bellied sliding turtle hanging out on that branch in the water. We have 2 different types of turtles that are mainly around here. It's either the yellow-bellied sliding turtle, which probably is the only turtle you will see while you're here. Other one being the snapping turtle. Actually, just a yellow-belly. Snapper turtles, if you ever see one, don't stick your hand near its mouth. Those things can take off a finger. They are not very friendly. But you'll probably won't see one. They tend to hang out near the bottom of swamps. They're also ambush predators. But trust me when I say you'll never get the 2 confused, because the yellow belly looks cute and the snapper turtle looks like a demon. Look over to your left real quick. This white building right here, that's an owl house. It's built for the either B-A-R-R-E-D Bard or the B-A-R-N Barn owl that live in this area. Those silver cones that were on its legs, those are there to prevent snakes from being able to climb up those posts and get to the edge. We're going to come up on another birdhouse right here on the left-hand side. We passed by a bunch of them. We're going to pass by a bunch more on the way back. I just want to put this in your mind. Those are all built by the Boy Scouts of America. They come out here and do their scouting activities pretty often. Those birdhouses themselves are usually occupied by either the bluebirds or our state bird, the Carolina wren. Because of the Carolina wren, those birdhouses actually have to be cleaned out every once in a while, because for some reason or another, the Carolina wren absolutely refuses to use the same nest twice. It would rather build a whole new nest, even on top of one it previously made. So eventually, we'll open those birdhouses up and we'll find 6 nests just stacked on top of each other, absolutely just filling the thing to the brim. So, need to be cleaned out every now and then. Strange birds. You ever see one? A little brown bird, kind of like the shape of a bluebird. But it's brown and it has white eyebrows. That's how you'll be able to tell it. That ditch we passed on the right, that'd be a former irrigation canal. This is how they would have gotten water in and out of the field from the Ashley River. And all this forested land that we're passing through right now, this would have not been here when this was a rice field. This would all have been cleared for rice production. And of course, all that digging and all that clearing is done by the enslaved people here. Hard backbreaking work. This is before power tools, so it's all axes, hand saws, and shovels. And not even to mention, it's hard work. It's also dangerous work. We're home to brown recluses, black widows, 32 different types of snakes, 6 of which are venomous. You got the cottonmouth moccasins, coral snakes, copperheads, 3 different types of rattlesnakes. That's not even to mention the dangers of one will face. If you work down in that rice field, we're about to come up on the biggest former rice field in front of me. fields full of gators. They were still full of them back then. Samba turtles. Still water to irrigate the crops invites pestilence onto this land in the form of mosquitoes and disease in the water. Very dangerous work for those enslaved people. So on the left, biggest former rice field, 150 acres. If you see on that tree line, that's about where the Ashley River lays. About 100 feet before that is the edge of our property, the berm, dike, or levee that separates this field from the Ashley River. Now, they use the Ashley River to irrigate all these crops. But if you remember, I told you at the very beginning that the Ashley River is part saltwater. Saltwater kills crops. So how'd they get around that? Well, it would be one of two things. One bit of knowledge being that in a brackish river, the salts in the salt water, where the saline makes that sink to the bottom, so they separate. And two, the other bit of knowledge being that the Ashley River is also a tidal river, meaning depending on what phase the moon is in, there could be a 6 to 8 foot difference in the high and low tide. So, they would have 30 what's called rice trunks lining that levee out there. Each one of them is a hollowed out cypress log dug into the side of the levee, one side poking out each end. And they would have gates or plugs on either side, and each would have been manned by an enslaved person called a trunk minder. They would have been there to open and close the gates, to let the water in and out for high and low tide, and taste the water periodically for salt to make sure nothing's getting in. Even though rice is planted and harvested within the dry field, it needs to be flooded and de-flooded about 2 to 3 times during the 9-month growing process. We still have about 2 of those rice trunks remaining today, but they are still fully operational. This is still how we get water in and out of this field today. Coming up right here on my left. This is at the edge of the garden. This would be a good way to end your garden walk today. This would be a wildlife observation tower. It doesn't last 20 years or so. Good way to get a good look at how big that former rice field is, and not just that, do some bird watching or alligator spotting if you're lucky. There's actually a funny story to do with that tower. I happened about 3 weeks ago. One of our regular photographers was taking some photos up there, and when he decided to come down for the day, go home, what greeted him at the bottom of that tower but a wild bobcat? So yeah, we've got wild bobcats in the area, and somewhere on that guy's camera, he's got a pretty good picture of one pretty close to him. We actually have a bobcat in our petting zoo. If you didn't know, we have a petting zoo. We also have a gator in the petting zoo, but I must stress, out of all the animals in the petting zoo, those are the only 2 you cannot pet. Sorry. But you can pet everything else that's in there. For instance, there's white-tailed deer in the zoo. I think I've mentioned this already, but all of this land is wildlife territory. All wildlife estuary. These animals are not captured, controlled, or anything like that. They're free to go as they please. Although a lot choose to call this place home because there's plenty of habitat, plenty of food around here. But in the case for the animals that call the petting zoo home, they have been deemed one way or another unfit to live in the wild by themselves. So now they live with us, and we take care of them. Coming up on my left here at this sign that says Return to Gardens. This is another entrance to the gardens. Right behind this sign you'll see some smaller varieties of bamboo. Take a look out for that stuff. It's called canebrake bamboo, and it's actually native here. Most people think Asian for bamboo, but there are actually a few types of bamboo that grow native to the Americas, that being one of them. The Native Americans that actually use that stuff for basket weaving and certain tools. Locals around here use it for fishing poles and whatnot. Very useful plant. Take a look off to your left. You may be easily able to spot some taller bamboo that's in the garden. Now as we finish up our tour, I want to talk to you a little bit more about those gardens. And I want to talk to you about the man who started them. A told you about him before. It'd be the Reverend John Drayton. I told you all about his mistake, but I didn't tell you his full story. He is an interesting one. See, the Reverend John Drayton, she was actually not supposed to be the original owner of Magnolia. His older brother was. And his older brother was for a good period of time, until he suffered and died at the hands of a hunting accident. He would die on the steps of the big house, placing suddenly the full control and ownership of this plantation in the hands of the Reverend John Drayton. This would come as quite a shock, not just because his brother had died, but because he lived up north in Philadelphia with his wife Julia. Now suddenly he has to move down to South Carolina and take control of this place. But his wife Julia does not want to come with him. She's a Philadelphia socialite. She does not want to leave home. She does not like the weather down here, nor the critters. She absolutely refuses to come. So, in 1840, the Reverend John Drayton is quoted as saying, wanting to make an earthly paradise. He creates these gardens, at least to the extent that they are here today, in order to remind her of home, but also make the transition from north to south a better one for her. The gardens themselves, they're built in what's called the English Romantic style, which is different from a garden that y'all may be familiar with, both being in the French formal style being square-cut hedges, very manicured plants. Beautiful, don't get me wrong, but that's just not what we do here. British Romantic style is meant to look more natural, like it all grew here by itself. Of course, we planted it, but from there on out, looks as if it came here by itself. Alright, as we come towards the big house, I'm going to tell y'all a little bit about more things you can do while you're here. For instance, talked about the Slavery to Freedom tour. If you want a good look at that big old rice field we passed, but also a look at the wildlife now called at home, you're going to want to take the boat tour. Otherwise, if you want to check out what's in the big house, you can take the house tour. On my direct left, we got the horticultural maze, which is fun if you're a kid, still fun if you're an adult. On the right, we have part of our petting zoo with that fence over there. You may see some miniature horses. And right now, we're coming up on the back of the house. Fun fact. When you see this house, if you haven't already seen it today, this is the back of it. The front of it faces the river. Reason for that being is that that road y'all came in on was not paved until the 1940s. Meaning that the easiest way to get here would have been via the river. So the front of the house faces where most of the guests would have come from. And to wrap up our tour for today, I want to show y'all the very much postcard shot of Magnolia over here on the left. See the white bridge on the dark water. Does it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed my tour today. For those of y'all that have a house tour or a boat tour, or you want to check out the gift shop, this will be your stop. Otherwise, if you have Slavery to Freedom, or you just want to get off where we started, I'll take the rest of y'all up about 100 yards up. Otherwise, if this is your stop, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.
Okay, guys, this is it. This is what I'm going to do today. We're going to do a little more looking around. Just give you a little something to see.